I'll be your host for this conference. The title of this conference is Breaking the Barriers to Inclusive Governance, and it's organized by ApexGuide Development Center. And ApexGuide Development Center is a civil society who is interested in ensuring that we promote good governance and democratic development in Nigeria. And as a result of that, we deemed it fit to come up with something around that topic to talk about inclusive governance. The conference is a two-day program, today and tomorrow. And for today's session, we are going to be having two sessions, which will be delivered by two seasoned people in their respective field. The first session is enforcing human rights in Nigeria, the challenges and way forward, which is going to be handled by Barrister Femi Adenitan. And the second session is the prospects and women in Nigerian contemporary politics, which is going to be handled by Professor Irene Pogoson. And each session is 40 minutes. So I'd like you to sit back and pay attention and take necessary questions and necessary things you need regarding those two topics. There are some certain rules we would like you to follow as we go on with our program so that we all have a good time together, enjoy ourselves, and have a productive time. I would like you to remember that the Zoom link that you've been able to join today is also the same Zoom link you are going to be using to join the meeting for tomorrow. And that's one. The second rule we would like you to take note is immediately you are joining in, please try to mute your microphone so that we don't have any interference and disturb whoever is making the presentation. And the third rule is we'll be recording this meeting. So this meeting is going to be recorded so that we are not invading on anybody's privacy. So we'll be recording this meeting. I would also like you to turn your video on in between the session. We would like to take a group photograph whereby we have for record purposes and for future references. And also you could also share the Zoom link to people, your friends, and everybody around you who might want to benefit from this topic. Without wasting too much of our time, we'll go straight into the session. And I would love to invite my colleague, Samuel Ayoko, to read the citation of our first speaker, and we'll introduce him and allow him to take over as we start the program. Over to you, Ayoko.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can we all hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Olufemi to read the citation of our barrister, distinguished barrister, Olufemi Adenitan. So I'll start by saying, Mr. Olufemi Adenitan is a lawyer, a political scientist, and development practitioner. He's a barrister at law, BL, holds a Bachelor of Law and Bachelors in Political Science and International Relations, and also Masters in Management, and also another Master in Development Studies at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Olufemi has worked and volunteered for several development-oriented institutions across Europe and Africa. Previously, he worked as Executive Director for Greenhouse Resource Center, that's GHRC, and also a national NGO where he's a member of the Board of Trustees. He possesses the expertise to coordinate emergency aid for quick impact projects to meet the social needs of the poorest and displaced person, certified and a professional expert in his field. Dr. Olufemi is a certified protection of civilian POC officer, disarmament and demobilization and reintegration officer, and is a civil military relation officer. It's my pleasure this afternoon to invite to this Zoom stage our distinguished speaker, Olufemi Adenitan, to take us further in this conference. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I find it as a great honor and privilege to be with you today and to share some of my thoughts. I will be, Larry, if you can just put up the slides, so the first part of the slide, so our viewers can see. So it's a great pleasure again, once again, and thank you all for coming up today for this kind of discussion we'll be having. I hope it's going to be stimulating enough. Some of us who are new to the aspect of human rights within this angle, this space, then we can get ourselves much acquainted with the operations of how it is in terms of in practice and in some part of theory. So it's a whole lot for us. We're going to be learning, and let's make it as engaging as possible. If at any time I'm speaking and you have a particular question, you can as well put it up on the chat, and also you can as well put the info, any of your question. You can raise up your hand, and then you'll be allowed to speak. And there'll be a time for us to have a kind of an engagement. If you like, you can call it citizens engagement on this kind of platform, so we can have a stimulating conversation here. Without wasting much of your time, I would like us to move to the next slide. Larry, please, if you can do that. Okay. Yeah, so this will be the structure of how my presentation today will be structured at. We're giving you a general understanding of what it is, human rights. As you know, these are inalienable rights, rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, rights that are also universal. And this will form like the basis of our understanding of why human rights is important as a concept or as something that should be taken very seriously, and why we as an organization, having worked for a couple of years in the Greenhouse Resource Center and being a lawyer as well, and how it has, my experience in the field I will be sharing with you, and hopefully we will be able to engage further. So we'll be talking about the legal mechanisms for human rights enforcement in Nigeria, which is the second phase. And the third leg of this conversation today will be on the fundamental right and enforcement procedure rules, which was, these are the kind of rules that the Chief Justice of the Federation oftentimes come up with that tend to guide the way at which we can apply for enforcement of for fundamental rights in cases of breach. And the fourth phase will be on the challenges of the enforcement of rights, human rights in Nigeria. Then we shall be looking at the way forward, having examined the challenges, and we see if there's some certain positives and hopes that we might take from this discussion and see as citizens, as individuals who will be engaging ourselves in our space. Then we will know through this, we collectively, all of us will make the conclusion. Yeah, so that's the content so far, the sixth phase of this presentation. And yeah, let's just stay with us and as we move forward in the conversation. Larry, can you move to the next slide? Next, please. So essentially, the background that we need to understand about when it talks about human rights. The first, please return back to the first slide. The first slide of the introduction. The first slide of introduction. No, the first slide. Yes, go back one more time. Yeah. So while you saw that out, I will just keep talking. So essentially, human rights itself, these are inalienable rights, which I have said earlier. So by the virtue of being human, you have this right. It's part of us. So, and without prejudice to your race, to color, to nationality, everyone does the slide here. So without prejudice to this, we all have this fundamental right. So, and according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, which is the UN framework for the understanding of this. So the specific section, the specific articles from 1 to 30 actually give us a very detailed understanding of how nations they should treat citizens and what's expected of it in the international affairs as well. So why do we have to take this concern of human rights very serious? Why is it very serious? Why is it serious? Because it's serious. It's in our law. Of course, the Nigerian 1999 Constitution, as amended, specifically made consigns to the Chapter 4 of the Constitution itself. What does Chapter 4 actually talk about? It recognizes that everyone from the Section 33 up until Section 44 of that particular statutory document actually allude to the fact that being human, we have the right, and when there are cases of breach and how we should go about such situations. So that as well also leads to other further pockets of statutory legal provisions, which also helps our understanding. But the question is, we need to ask ourselves is that, why do we have such kind of beautiful legislation, beautiful statutory provision, the African Charter on People's Rights and all of that? We have the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. We have various forms of beautiful legal documents, but still, Nigeria today is still confronted with myriads of wicked problems, as you know, across the space. So we talk about these issues because they are very important for us in practice. Having been in the field, I've seen cases of right violations. I've seen cases where, because in the NGO I work for, we've seen cases where people come to us and their rights are violated and they say they want to seek protection. But we realize in the course of our interrogation, our discussion with some of these clients, they don't actually know their rights. So why is it that Nigeria as a country as it is don't know our rights, and despite the increasing awareness that is civil society organizations such as what we are doing now, they are doing, and still people still don't know their rights. So this is one thing again that we must think of as we progress in our discussion today. And why is it that in certain instances, some people rights are being continually entrenched on, some people rights are continually have this continuous issue of right violation, particularly in the developing country like Nigeria. But whereas when we compare it with the global north countries, we find it a sharp difference, because we know that the global north has full protection of person, of their citizens. So yes, these are the kind of discussion of our discussion, right? So can we move to the next slide, please? So yes, I've talked about the fundamental rights enforcement mechanisms, of which, looking at the order 2, rule 1 of the fundamental right enforcement procedures talked about, provides for any person whose rights has been infringed on can seek protection, can be covered through the application of this provision, this order 2, rule 1. Also, we need to understand that who can apply for the enforcement of the fundamental rights. So Section 46 of the 1999 Constitution as amended provides for any person whom has been or likely to have had issues relating to this issue of concerns as relates to its violation of this right, its right. Section 46, Section 1 gives that individual the right to apply and and the demand for protection of his rights. So, of course, we have specific legal framework that gives every citizen the right to seek redress or to seek to demand for protection in cases where rights have been violated. So the whole idea of human rights and humanitarian protection and all these sorts of issues is predicated on one assumption. According to the origin of state, everyone has given its rights, surrendered its rights to the supernatural body, because the state, as it is supposed to take perfect recognition to the right of its citizens. So we expect that institutions of state apparatus must work together at ensuring that citizens, individual, whoever is in this territorial space must be adequately protected. So, but why is it that we continue to have these kind of issues of human rights not being upheld or not being protected by states? So very shortly, I'll be unveiling to you some of the challenges that we've experienced. I'll be trying to make it more of the interplay between to be kind of overlapping, because I'll be talking more about in terms of practice, in terms of case laws, evaluation, and to make it more from my practical experience as well. I think it should be able to enrich our understanding. Larry, if you can move to the next slide, that will be fine. Then let's go. Yes. So I've mentioned in our previous discussion about the fundamental right enforcement procedures. 2009 that actually has its own that derives its own strength, right, from the chapter 4 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 Constitution as amended. So yes, this, just to restate further again, this is where we are going to find your rights as it is. So if you look from 33, 34 down up to 44, then you'll be able to know in instances when rights have been deprived. So can we move to the other slides? Yeah, so what are the challenges that has been encountered? Why is it that we continue to face challenges in the enforcement of human rights? Over the years, I've come to realize that in terms of the practice, that illiteracy has been a major setback, right? So because a lot of people don't actually and are unaware of their rights. So, and for this reason, it has a way of impeding on their understanding, right? So it has a way of impeding on their understanding of the right, of the law, and all of this kind of a thing. There's a case where a child defilement was a 14-year-old child was defied by these suspects, and the mother came to approach us at that time. And I can tell you that this the family was not very much aware that what these suspects had done to their ward, to their child, was something that's bad. So they was like, okay, so they were even trying to see if they could maybe hide up these kind of issues and don't bring it to the forefront, so that justice can be served for them. So of course, illiteracy is one of the greatest challenges that has been the setback to the enforcement of human rights, because one, it is for the individual to understand its right, and that is for it to be able to demand for right when it's been breached. So the other part is poverty. Poverty, according to the World Bank report on March 2022, it stated that 4 in 10 Nigerians are poor. 4 in 10 Nigerians are poor. So the figure also say that about over 80 million people live in abject poverty, right? So people are poor. So people think that, oh, they cannot, they don't have the financial resource to seek for legal support when in cases of human rights violations. So I think when your right is being breached or being deprived, you just, oh, there's nothing you can do. We have a lot of instances where the NSAS protest that took place in 2020, and a lot of Nigerians were complaining, alluded to the fact that the security agencies and all of that they were culpable in terms of how they maltreated some of the youths. And this is one of the serious issues. And when people are poor, they look at cost of litigation, cost of securing a lawyer, and all this kind of a thing. And they are unable to push for their rights enforcement. So this is a great challenge, which it's somebody that has sufficient enough that we're thinking that he wants to seek for legal support, unless in instances where we have free legal services, that's when we can say legal aid, poverty can be on the subside, cannot be an issue there. So there's this particular case which is very, very important for us. It's Alade versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's a case that borders on armed robbery. Like it was a suspect whom it was arrested by the police, and at the end of it, Mr. Alade at that time he had this issue of the police accosted him, arrested him. They took him, they arraigned him to the magistrate. They put him in Kirikiri. He was there for quite some time. He was there for 9 years. They could not afford illegal support, illegal assistance at that time. So what happened to Alade? He spent 9 years unjustly in prison. And at the end of it, it was ECOWAS court that now made the judgment that that's a particular Alade actually do not have any, was not by any chance related to that crime that was being alleged of. So this is a story of Alade and a lot of Nigerians who are in detention, for instance, who are in prison, who are in different parts of the criminal facility in Nigeria. This to just tell you the level of the precarious nature of our judicial system, and which needs to be rethink. So it's good that we are having this kind of responsible conversation today and engagement to see how within our space and as an organization, of course, I'm aware that your organization is also working in this space of ensuring the protection of people whose rights are being violated. So another thing again is that can also impede to the challenges of the enforcement of fundamental rights is insecurity. So the case of Asari Dokubo, Asari Dokubo and the Federal Republic of Nigeria also gives us a very crucial example. Yes, human rights are rights that are good, that we must protect, but we must also understand that in instances, it's not in all instances that we enforce people's rights, okay? So in that particular instance case, the court maintained that if you release Asari Dokubo at that time, it's going to cause a challenge to the state, to the society. So its fundamental right enforcement was held at that time. So these are the challenges which we've identified. You can move to the next slide, and yeah, we can move to the next slide. So another thing again we need to understand is uncooperative government and security. Just like to move very quickly so that we can have time for discussion. Then agencies corruption. So of course we have this kind of problems, kind of challenges in Nigeria today, where we allege that public officials are corrupt, even judicial officials are corrupt. We all know the case of the Code of Conduct Bureau Onoge, the former Chief Justice of the Federation, who was alleged to have been corrupt, and he was asked to step down, was removed, and all of that. So when we have an issue that borders on the judicial system, where we cannot actually say that the dispensation of justice can be fair, can be straight, without prejudice to giving judgment to the powerful against the weak. This is an issue which we must relook for us to be able to understand that, understand human rights itself, and see if there's any opportunity for us to implement this said concept. The doctrine of human rights to when individuals' rights are being violated. Okay, so of course I've just told you the case of Justice Onoge, and there's this particular case that I was following up on Sahara report of this. Is it Ifyong whom alleged that it was a case that this was 2 days ago. It was in the High Court in Akwa Ibom, and he alleged that the Chief Justice of that particular place, of that particular state, has some relationship, some friendship with the governor, Udo Manuel, and for that reason, for the one of the instances where we realized that a human rights lawyer, was detained, was asked to derobe, to step down from the bar, and as we speak now is in prison. So these are the issue when you are having contention as to the integrity of judicial officers. You're having a contention or issues as to regarding individual itself whom are supposed to be upholding the tenets of a legal regime, legal framework, and they are caught or culpable in corrupt practices. So yes, another problem again, which is the last part of the challenges, is in the delay in trial. So a lot of times we know, we've identified that one of the greatest challenge we faced as a country, as a nation, is delay in trial. Some cases are awaiting trial 10, 15 years before you get justice, and we say a delayed justice, justice delays is justice denied. So there's a need to rethink this in overhaul in order to have a better legal system. So how then do we, can you move to the next part? So how then do we become more inclusive? How then do we make or remake or imagine a new legal system that protects everyone? So it's about trying to move from the challenges to the solution, right? So what are the way forward? What are the way forward? Can you move to the way forward, please? So we can just go through this very quickly. So what are the way forward? Independence of the judiciary. We need that. We need to do a reform. We need judicial reform, of course. We need it because, yeah, yes, I totally agree that, of course, we need a reform for us to be able to have confidence in the system, judicial system. Looking at the case of we had recently about the jailbreak in Kuje in Abuja, that a whole lot of inmates were let loose, some of which were under detention and awaiting trial for quite a long time. And this itself has a way of delaying, slowing down justice and all of that, and which until we rethink the judicial system, get more judges into offices, give them good wages, make a conducive environment for them to dispense their justice and all of that, to carry out judicial responsibilities. Is a lot of ways we can come about this speedy dispensation of justice. Another thing is, again, is about continuous enlightenment of the citizens. So we can this kind of decent engagement we're having today is very wonderful. Trying to enable people to understand that yes, you have your rights. Your rights can be demanded for. You can approach the court, and you can ask for when things are not going in the way it should be. Right. So another thing again should be alternative dispute resolution, which is a form of the ADR right. So not all cases, not all human rights cases are criminal in nature, right? So some, for instance, I give you an instance. If Mr. A now, Mrs. A is being asked to leave a job, let's say because of the fact that the employer just asked him to leave because of certain misconduct or something, right? So what that Mr. A will do in this sense is to approach the court in terms of the labor, in terms of on that issue, not for human rights enforcement. But in the instance where, due to the fact that Mrs. A got pregnant or is pregnant, and as a result of that, the employer decide to ask him to leave the employment, of course, you can approach this, you can file a fundamental right for human enforcement of human rights, which is another thing, right? So in this sense, alternative dispute resolutions can also help. So it's not in all cases you go and bombard the court in terms of with different legal proceedings, just to because by the time you are bringing unnecessary action, forum shopping, bringing different things to the court, of course, it would slow down the course of justice. So yes, so these are the way forward. Yes, can you move to the next slide, please? So let's conclude now. So an enhanced approach must be adopted to cover the nuance of civil rights, addressing the compatibility of Chapter 2. So remember that Chapter 2 of the Constitution of 1999 Constitution talks about directive, objective, and fundamental directive principle of state policies, which talked about every other thing that it also make reference to the some other provisions with right to education, right to welfare, these kind of issues, healthcare, education, social amenities. These are the kind of issues that Chapter 2 actually talked about in the 1999 Constitution. Similarly, the African Union Convention for the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons also alluded to this fact that this Chapter 2, which is otherwise known as the Kampala Convention, is very important for us to be able to secure the protection of human rights of persons, right? But sadly, this particular charter, this particular rights as enshrined in Chapter 2, they are not enforceable. You cannot go to the court to demand enforceability. So another problem comes again. Why is it that we keep on having issues with respect to the fact that we have some certain brilliant provisions in Nigerian Constitution, and the enforcement issue becomes a great challenge? So what then do we do? For instance, I talked about the Kampala Convention, the African Union Convention for the Protection and the Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons, right? So the Kampala Convention, it is known as the Kampala Convention. So particularly in Article 12 of that set legal instrument, which Nigeria has ratified, but we have not domesticated that specific provision. What does it talk about? It talks about, Article 12 talks about compensation for everyone who has suffered loss in terms of being internally displaced. Of course, you and I will understand that when the farmer elders, or when we have issues of this Boko Haram insurgency comes to invade your community, invade your space, and they chase people away. So now you've lost right to economic stand, you've lost rights to decent life. So the provision is saying that the government or the state in question should put up mechanisms towards ensuring that it protects these particular persons, right? But sadly, as it is, we've rectified that particular set provision, the Kampala Convention, and it has not been domesticated. When it means domesticated, it means that the parliament, the National Assembly, will pass this through its normal house procedures, and it becomes binding on the government. So compensation, Article 12, still a problem. Then another part again, which I wanted to mention, was obligation of state relating to sustainability for those who are having issues in Article 11 of that particular Kampala Convention. It's also talking about how then do we protect this set of people who are not properly covered, who are displaced. Being displaced is not by their own making, right? So it's based on the state, incapability of the state, because the main essence of the origin of state itself is to protect life and property. So the state has failed, agreed, okay? Now, when the state has failed, what are you doing in terms of integration, return, protecting of these persons' right to life, right to a decent life, education, social amenities? Because the basic needs of the people and the human needs of the people has been affected, the basic human needs, right? So how then do you do that? So this is another problem again, which I think it's also requires the government, the stake actors, for them to work collectively to ensure that first it implements certain parts of the procedures to protect people, and secondly, it also someone wants to talk. Okay, I will just round up quickly so that the person has a right to to ask questions, right? So yeah, so this is part of the concerns, and so the last part is a constitutional amendment to keep up with the evolution of the law. Yeah, so part of it is to embed this aspect of the Kampala Convention and put it into practice, because law itself is evolving, and yes, to see how we can have an appropriate inclusion of everyone in it. And if we get it right, if you get it correctly and get it right from the legal angle, the legal dimension, of course, we are one way we are one way to addressing the problem we're having in Nigeria, and thereafter we can have a much better society. So in short, I'm very hopeful that a lot of work is still ongoing. The civil society and other stakeholders are actually doing its roles. The National Human Rights Commission is working so very assiduously, and then other organizations, civil society organizations are actually doing their best, their bit. So, like you know, Nigeria is an evolving country, developing country. So we would still work in the progress. So thank you so very much, everyone, for listening, for your kind patience. Yeah, I hope we can have within the conversation. So if there's any specific parts that any questions, you can indicate by showing of hands. So let's see.
Okay, sir, for that insightful session. Just as you had said, if you have questions, you question them. There's a quick question in the chat box. It says that with the porous judicial system in Nigeria have been politically controlled, either by presidency and powerful politicians of the country.
Yeah. So, okay. So I will take that question now. So you may wish to end this. Okay. Yeah. So I will take that question. With the current system, so there, of course, the chapter 3, section 324 talks about how the demarcation of the organs of where the legislatures and the executive, they are kind of, should I say, they are almost the same. We've not really seen any much progress in terms of how they have been able to check one another. We just saw on the news recently that some senators, which can be regarded as, which Femi Adesina has regarded as the presidential spokesperson, has regarded as minority senator, being requesting for the impeachment of the president due to the gross violation of human rights in some certain aspects. Like I can tell you, humanitarian aid workers, for instance, in peace support operations, some of which is in the Middle Belt region, some of which are in the Middle East and North Central, they have been on daily attack. We have severe issues where a whole lot of people are actually clamoring for a reform, a rejig of the judicial system. But because the president operates in the federal system, of course, has kind of control, even appoints sometimes confirms the Chief Justice of the Federation. The Senate President also is formed some allegiance to him, all of that. So the current 9th Senate at the moment, I fear, do not have that right to actually demand for total independence, right? So even in the current judicial system as well, it's an issue. I just gave you the case in Akwa Ibom at the moment that's going on. And yeah, this is the kind of issues that we need to look at. Yeah, so of course, we hope that one day when we have the right direction for us to define a whole lot of wrongs that has gone in the institutions, in the judicial institutions and other sectors of the country. So I think we have Mr. Bakari. I think he raised his hand first. So Mr. Bakari, if you can just unmute and you can ask your question, great. Otherwise, we can move to the other Salewu Ajishola. So any of you can take your question first. Just unmute yourself and take your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I'm back at your Matayo.
Okay, nice.
Okay. I just, when you were talking the other time, you mentioned the issue of independence of judiciary.
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to ask, do you think if we, because when in some of the literature I've read, if we want to guarantee the independence of judiciary, we talk about their payment, the payment of the judges, we should not be under the executive, that should be within, it should be from the consolidated fund, that the appointment of the chief judge and other ones should not be from the executive. But with that kind of actions, do you think it will not impede on the principle of check and balances, as so to say? Because you also mentioned the issue of Akwa Ibom now, whereby a chief justice of the state has to send a lawyer to jail because maybe, I don't know what may have transpired. That alone seems to be an abuse of power. That if they are not careful, where we are trying to give the independence to allow the independence of judiciary, we will also impede on the issue of check and balances. That's number one. Number two, the one that is giving us a lot of concern is the issue of the disregard of the court judgment by the government, especially this particular government, whereby, as we look at the case of Sasaki, look at the case of the what is the name of this security, the national security advisor to the former president, whereby court judgment asked them to be given bail, but the government insisted that he will not be given bail. All those ones are one of the reasons, and the government are the major reason why we have not had, why the rights of the citizen have not been protected. And I don't know, maybe you have a better explanation on what should be done to cater for those aspects. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Bakari, for that a very insightful question. Some of which is, I see that you are very much informed about the situation of things. Yeah, so just for record, the person, the lawyer, the human rights lawyer who was jailed is Inebe Effiong. I was sent to jail on the 27th July 2022. Is the lawyer for AAC. I don't know if you know, that's the party of Omoyele Sowore. That's the lawyer representing the political party. So, and it's on the news already. The Nigerian Bar Association in the person of Olumide Akpata, he has set up the first vice president to investigate the happenings and come up with the situation. So what was in that case, if I can just maybe within the short time explain. So it was an action between Udom Emmanuel, that's the governor of Akwa Ibom State, and Leo Ekpenyong. These are the two parties to the suit. So there was the Udom Emmanuel actually accused the defendant, who is Leo Ekpenyong, that he is trying to defame him, and because he has relationship with the court, according to what the account of Inebe Effiong, that's the lawyer whom I just noted that went to jail. He was the lawyer standing for this Leo Ekpenyong, right? So I'm just trying to make you understand the background, the build-up. So Udo Emmanuel had sued this Leo Ekpenyong to court, demanding that he has defamed his name due to certain things, because Leo Ekpenyong also is a lawyer. I'm talking about defendants, right? So the court awarded 1.5 billion to this particular defendant. So Leo Ekpenyong approached Inebe Effiong to take him to the court, and so that the court can revisit that matter, all of that. So what's happened now, what's very important is that there has been a particular rift between that particular human rights lawyer and the human rights lawyer and the governor, because he's always kind of someone that always keeps challenging the state, all of that. So there they have this kind of misunderstanding in the court, and the court said, the courts of the view that the way the human rights lawyer that approached the bench was not quite okay, and he was asked to step back from the bar, and then he was ordered to go to jail and all of that. So this is just the fact of the case, of course. So that's it. So at the moment, Nigeria, it is where we are today, because we are currently faced with this issue between the judiciary, the legislature, the executive. Everyone is relying on the judiciary because the executive, I mean. So the executive itself has this kind of overriding power, right, to control and to do and undo. Okay. Now, so that's it. So without taking much of your time, we are hopeful that one of these period, that there will be a much more effort at reforming the judicial system, so that everyone can be inclusive. They can be much more better systems for everyone. So yes, I don't know if I'm able to get your question, if I'm able to answer it correctly. If I am able, then we can move to the next. Can I just say that quickly? Maybe we can take two at a time, then we can move to the last. Okay. God's power.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Please go ahead with your question.
I know.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. We have really gained a lot. Quickly, my question will a little bit in line with what my colleague has just asked now regarding the independence of the judiciary as one of the solutions to enforcing the human rights in Nigeria. I want to come from the angle of issue of corruption that is also rattling within the judicial system. The outgone CDA that just left that office was accused of different misappropriation of a fund. And apart from this, we have been hearing cases of such within the judiciary that is supposed to be seen as the hope of the common man. If we are now saying, if the judiciary has not been totally given the autonomy that they deserve in terms of independence, and we are counting this, how sure are you that by the time they are given full-fledged independence, how are they not going to use that to multiple the level of corruption within the judicial system?
Very good. Yeah, very good question, Mr. Ajíṣọlá, right? Yeah. So, okay. This is again, like what we say oftentimes, that corruption is quite socially embedded. It's not part of the system. So barely can you really say that any part of any of the country or any of our institutions is not corrupt. So this is the problem we are having. So how then do we now do that? I would just like us to make reference to what Achebe said about when he talked about Nigeria. It is one of his book. He said the trouble with Nigeria. So what is the trouble with Nigeria? He's talking about leadership, right? Leadership problem. So leadership at what level? At the head. So if we can have, for instance, a president that, for instance, has, he actually does not want to interfere with the judiciary, and as if we decide today to give the judiciary total independence, give them a total reform of the judicial system and give them everything that is required, of course, they would, and don't make the judiciary be a rubber stamp of being a stooge to the executive. Is when you know that your next meal ticket actually comes from your payer, of which it's not supposed to be so, right? So everyone's supposed to be separate, supposed to be distinct from one another. It should not be like the judiciary must rely on the executive for finances to carry out its operations, right? So, but we are where we are today because the old system of how the federal character system or the federal structure has designed its, and also it's also in the interest of the executive to continue to keep the judiciary under its control, right? So, because it knows that once the judiciary continues to remain under the control of the executive, then they can use them for whatever thing they want to use them for, and maybe manipulate the leadership of the judiciary, all of that. But this is my own independent position, right? So I'm not speaking for anybody or so, but this is how I see it. Yeah, so I'm hopeful also being a lawyer, hopeful that the judiciary may have a total independence. But are we going to get there? Yes, I think we will. But when? I don't really know when. But hopeful that we are going to get a judiciary that has a recourse to the people. And yeah, so that's it. That's where I can answer that particular question. God's power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adipoti God's power by name.
Yeah. Nice.
Good afternoon, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. Please, I was actually happy for joining this program because it has even done more than I could even think of. But the question I wanted to ask is this, sir. With the look of things in this country, we believe that judiciary should have been the only help for the common men. But now it's only God that common men are looking up to. Now, in this country, can we ever achieve or get to a level whereby the common men will truly have a kind of faith and believe in our judiciary system? Because if you go to court, probably for any reason now you do not have money. At the end of the case will even backfire. So you will be the one to be blamed at the end because you are fighting against someone who has weight and influence. So is there any way we can actually do it as a country to get to a level whereby the common men will have faith, and that would be the solution to a judiciary system will be the solution to the problem of the common men in this country, sir?
Yeah, good question. Gospower Adepoju, you have asked a very wonderful question. This is how we as citizens should actually think about issues. But the problem again is about the common man. We are the common man, right? How then do we make our voice to be heard? So I want to look at it in terms of citizens' engagement, stakeholders' collaboration among stakeholders to ensure that we all work together, right? So everybody work together in improving and making sure that when you see somebody's right who has been deprived, you can demand for justice. Oftentimes, as a lawyer, when I take pro bono legal services, you even try to want to help the victim, and by the time you ask the victim to come the next time, the police or the other the suspect family may have put pressure on the victim and say, if you go, these are the kind of things we're going to do to you and all of that. And the victim tend to shy back. And of course, if you don't have the complainant coming to the court to present his case, you cannot make it a valid legal grounds for violation of human rights, okay? So it takes the individual whose right has been deprived to be able to come and register his complaint and follow the case through to the end. That's one. Two, there must be kind of civil society continuous engagement in terms of what the NGO is doing to educate, empower, make people to be aware of instances where their rights are breached and procedures or legal framework or legal directions towards attainment of these rights and enforcement of these rights. So it's a work in progress. It's not something we can say that between the space of today and next year we can achieve. It's going to be a continuous work in progress. And also more lawyers must also come must also encourage lawyers as well to continue to give their free legal services, which otherwise known as pro bono cases, to ensure that it's not about money, but about showing that the course of justice is done and it's seem to have been done. So again, this kind of debate is not something we can give a perfect solution for now. It's a continuous engagement, which in the course of time we keep on in this kind of responsible discussions and all of that dialogue. So, Gospel, you've had a very good concern. You're one of those great Nigerians that want to see a change in the system. And I'm also very hopeful that we'll get to the time where the legal system in Nigeria will be very effective and great. So I think that's all for now. So I'm going to leave you. You can write to the organizers. My email address will be there. My phone number will be there. You can contact me. You can also contact in case you have seen someone whose rights is being violated, or you need to enforce this person's right when it borders on human rights abuse or such. You can write to me directly. Currently, I'm in England at the moment, but I have some team in Nigeria that, of course, they can push for such rights enforcement and all of that. So let's keep this conversation going. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I would leave the host now to continue the second part of the discussion today. Once again, it's a pleasure being with you, and we look forward to a continuous engagement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, Barrister. We really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm very, very certain that our listeners has been able to take some insightful lesson, and just as you hope that one day you're going to have an independent judiciary who will be able to fight for our rights and for we the less privileged in the society. Without wasting too much of our time, we'll move straight into the second session. The topic of our second session is the prospect of Nigerian youths, the process of youth and women in Nigerian contemporary politics. And our second speaker is right with us here. And so I'll do the introduction. I'll introduce her, and she'll take over the presentation. Then we'll move on from there. Okay. Okay, so I'll be introducing, reading the citation of our second speaker. Atuaje Irene Pogoson is a professor in the Department of Political Science, University of Ibadan. She holds a BA honor degree in history from the University of Ibadan, from where she obtained a master's and doctoral degrees. She also attended the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and the Frederick Ebert Steinfunk First, New York, United States of America, full academic for Young International Policy Analysis. She is the first female lecturer in the history of the Department of Political Science, University of Ibadan, Ibadan. Before joining the University of Ibadan in 2000, she worked as a research fellow and / administrative secretary with the Presidential Panel on Nigeria since Independence History Project. Between 2005 and 2007, Professor Pogoson served as a policy analyst on governance with the Independent Policy Group, Abuja, a policy think tank for President Olusegun Obasanjo. Professor Pogoson is a member of a number of learned societies and organizations, including the African Political Science, AAPS, Nigerian Political Science Association, NPSA, Nigerian Society of International Affairs, NSIA, Society for International Relations and Awareness, SRIA, Nigerian Election Working Group, NEWG, Women's Research and Documentation Center, WORDOC. She consults for a number of national and international agencies and institutions, including the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS, KURU, Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, Foreign Service Academy, National Defense College, NDC, Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, and the Electoral Institute, CEI, Women's Advocate Research and Documentation Center, WRDC, Initiative for Women's Studies in Nigeria, National Democratic Institute, NDI, Action Aid, USAID Nigeria, and the Frederick Ebert Steinfunk. Professor Pogoson was on the Advisory Council of the Ibrahim Index African Governance, IIAG, of the M.O. Ibrahim Foundation, and a member of the Scientific Committee of the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, CODISTRIA. She has been a guest lecturer and an external examiner at the University of Lagos, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Lagos State University, Olabisi Olabanjo University, Agowe, Covenant University, Ota, Babcock University, Ile-Ife. She's a highly motivated researcher, teacher trainer, administrator, and policy analyst with over 2 decades of experience routing intellectually diverse environments. She derives pleasure in impacting knowledge to others and is committed to utilizing her training in political and gender research and varied consulting experience to strengthen the transformation of women's political participation for socio-political, inclusive growth and sustainable development. She is knowledgeable in conveying and building bottom-up programs, a team leader, a member, and skilled communicator with excellent work ethics. Our research interests and international relations, with particular focus on foreign policy analysis, strategic studies, governance, and gender studies. She's a member of a number of learned societies and organizations. She is well published internationally and locally, and has several journal articles, chapters in books, and monographs to her credit. She's widely traveled and has attended numerous international and local conferences. Professor Pogoson is happily married and blessed with children and grandchildren. I present to you Professor Irene Pogoson. Over to you, ma.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, thank you for this invitation, and it's always a pleasure to have a time out, like I would call it, with the younger ones. And in my topic today is to investigate the prospects of youth and women in Nigeria's contemporary politics. That's the topic I have been given. And I believe that it's a topic that we are all aware of because we all live and breathe and experience politics in diverse ways. But now I'm going to focus mainly on the youth and women and how they interplay with Nigeria's contemporary politics. To start with, I would want us to share these two quotations. The first says, the power of youth is the commonwealth for the entire world. The faces of young people are the faces of our past, our present, and our future. And there's no segment in the society that can match the power and the realism, the enthusiasm and courage of the young people. And I'm sure we all agree with that. As it pertains to women, the quotation I have here says that to attain gender equality and full participation of women in decision-making indicators of democracy. The involvement of women in all aspects of political life produces more equitable societies and also delivers a strong and more representative democracy. And both quotations, I believe, speaks to the essence of inclusive democracy, which is the essence of this conference. And as an introduction, I want to say that if we narrowly define politics, we are referring to activities of governments, of politicians, of political parties, and also of individuals, we the people. And if we broadly define it, we're including the interrelationships between people, between men and women, between parents and children, between the youth and the aged, and the operation of power, the power play at every level of human interaction. And then when we talk about political participation, it includes a wide range of activities, and these activities span through people builds the notion that all citizens, male, female, young, old, boy, child, transgender, whatever gender, should be involved in decision-making processes that affect them. And this includes direct and indirect ways through which people of all ages tend to exercise influence as individuals, influence as members of networks, of associations, of groups, of communities, of institutions, and indeed, doing all of this through various political institutions. Now, some questions that are often asked about politics, about the political highway or the political road, as it were, would be, why the scarcity of youth and female candidates and elected officials? Are they uninterested? Are they unwilling? Are they uncertain? Another question would be, is the political system unresponsive? Is it impenetrable? Is it closed to contain only some particular groups of people? Is the issue that of the driver or the road? Now, the conclusion that one might want to reach is that it is both the driver and the road that matters to any journey. And first and ultimately, the driver's perception of whether he or she will face a smooth road or have faced smooth road conditions, or will it be stop and go traffic, would influence his or her choice to take or avoid a certain road. I'm sure we can all key into that. Likewise, youths and women envisage aspiring to political office, participating in politics, being representatives and all of that. They see all of these as greatly being affected by the cost and benefits of how they participate. The costs and benefits which they anticipate from that highway into politics that they want to traverse. And the political road conditions, unfortunately and sadly, appear to differ for youths and women and older men. Now, ultimately, indeed, we find that ultimately, the issue of women and youth in politics have generated much more debate than what I have mentioned and the questions I earlier mentioned. And a greater participation of women and young people in the political life of the country will undoubtedly lead to a stronger, inclusive democracy. You find that a consultative and participative decision-making structure that involves young people, that involves women of all ages, is more than necessary in meeting the varied aspiration of our diverse nations. Unfortunately, both the young ones and women at every socio-political level will find themselves highly underrepresented in the political realm. And besides this, they are far removed from decision-making levels. And this is saying that the political playfield, the political road, the highway in each country, including ours, Nigeria, has its own peculiar characteristics. But one feature common to all of this is that it is uneven and it is not encouraging to youth and women's participation. And so we're saying that politics in many countries today is dominated by elite groups. It's engulfed by their wealth, their privilege, which ensures their path to power is unhindered. And I'm sure we can key into this and understand this even within our current electoral process. The past primaries, for instance, and the ongoing events within the political realm. Now, traditionally, these power structures exclude marginalized people. And when we talk about marginalized people, this includes the youth, the women, people living with disabilities, the vulnerables in all shades and color, who may lack the resources to reach influential positions, who could be actively discriminated against when pursuing their political ambitions. Now, this type of politics is antithetical to inclusive political participation, because inclusive political participation ideally is a fundamental political and democratic right for all. It is crucial to building stable and peaceful societies and developing policies that respond to the specific needs of all citizens, specific needs of all, and not just some citizens. And so an inclusive democracy means that all citizens, male, female, young and old, should feel represented and their voices should be heard. And linked to this will be parity democracy, which implies the equal representation of women and men and young ones in decision-making positions. However, we find that the youth, the women, the minorities, the vulnerable and marginalized groups oftentimes are excluded from mainstream political structures. And this results in a lack of genuine representation in the decision-making process and also impacts on the democratic process at large. Statistics tells us that there are more than 3.5 billion people under the age of 30. That's the youth living in the world today. And indeed, this is the highest number in history. It also tells us that the population of females in the world is about 3.905 billion, which is like half of the world population. But unfortunately, in spite of the size of the demographics, which I have mentioned, the high level of political and social engagement among the youth and the women notwithstanding, they remain one of the most underrepresented groups in politics and public life, globally, nationally as well. Now, there's a significant problem here, because given that some of the world's toughest challenges disproportionately affect young people and men, It means that for the political systems which we run to be participatory and to be representative, all parts of the society must be included in this system. And it means also that when the young ones and women are disenfranchised one way or the other, or disengaged from political processes, a significant portion of the population itself has little or no voice. Neither do they have influence in decisions which affect aspects and specific aspects of their lives. And the major consequence and result of this is there's an undermining of political systems' representativeness. Now, specifically, you find that concerning the youth, people under the age of 35 are rarely found in formal political leadership positions. In a third of countries globally speaking, eligibility for the national parliament starts at 25 years or higher, and it is a common practice to refer to politicians as young if they are below 35 to 40 years of age. Now, youths are therefore not adequately represented in formal political institutions and processes such as parliaments, which includes, for instance, our National Assembly, political parties, the electoral process, and indeed public institutions and administrations. Now, the youth is even more, this situation is even more difficult for both young women in particular, okay, as well as women at mid-level and decision-making leadership positions. Now, as it concerns women, therefore, you find that there's a global proportion of women parliamentarians, which stands at only 26.1%. Juxtapose this against the number of women, which I told you are like half of humanity. And this is according to IPU's latest Women in Parliament in its 2001 report. Also, in the 48 countries that had parliamentary elections last year, women candidates won only 28% of the new seats. In most countries, the goal of achieving meaningful gender equality in politics remains elusive. Women cast ballots in equal and even greater numbers than men, but they continue to trail behind men in the political realm. And so what I'm saying is that youths and women are not a minority. They actually represent more than half of humanity, both in quantitative dimension, and they are one of its major components in qualitative dimensions. And from available data from INEC this year, over 75% of registered voters in Nigeria currently are youths and women. That means that they form the largest percentage in the statistics index of INEC. However, the underrepresentation of youths and women constitute a serious democratic deficit, which I have alluded to, and this undermines the legitimacy of contemporary democratic ideal. The disparity which I am explaining raises fundamental questions of social justice, when you find that young people and women are the majority of the electorate, but they are few of the elected leaders. Indeed, it also has negative effects on future generations, because there is an ongoing imbalance in equal opportunities, which can affect and indeed would affect the prospects for both social and economic development in the long run. Now, in terms of youth in politics, there are some major issues which I'd like us to note, which I'm highlighting. First is that young men and young women are indeed resourceful influences, and they are active sources of innovations, particularly in the digital and tech world that we are in now. And throughout history, they have participated, they have contributed, and they have even engendered important changes in political systems, in decision-making dynamics, and in socioeconomic opportunities. And so when they are allowed, when they are permitted, you find that young men and women are traditionally active politically in higher institutions, but often they are disillusioned with political leadership and with political institutions, and you find that they are excluded also from political development. There is strong evidence that the participation of young people in formal institutional political processes is also relatively low when compared to older citizens. And indeed, when you look at the average age of our politicians in Nigeria, you know that there's no gainsaying this. Now, this challenges the representativeness of the political system, and oftentimes it leads to the disenfranchisement of young people. And more, the youth are inclined to participate in informal processes more than formal political and electoral ones. For instance, in activism, in protest, in campaigning, in driving reforms online, particularly the social media. And you will also find in literature that there are some distorting assumptions about young people, about how they participate in political processes. And these are common. And usually these assumptions, wrong assumptions, are triggered by lack of understanding and oftentimes by prejudice. Now, they are inaccurately versions of the character and experiences of most youths. And please note that, like women, the youth do not constitute a homogeneous group. Now, the distorting assumptions can lead to discrimination against the young people. And this, like I said earlier, would negatively affect their capacity, their capability, and their enthusiasm to participate in political processes. Now, some aspects of these negative assumptions about the youth could be, well, somewhat grounded in some versions of reality, but on the whole, they can be pretty misleading. For instance, they are apathetic about and disengaged from politics, and so they don't bother to vote. They lack maturity, they lack experience, and they lack knowledge. And the implication here is that they're not capable or intelligent enough to make informed decisions, such as when voting, and also that they can be easily manipulated. It is also assumed that they are anti-state, in quotes, and so they have a propensity for violence and extremism. But this notwithstanding, it's important for us to note that opportunities for youth to engage in governance, on one hand, to participate in political and decision-making processes largely depends on existing political, socioeconomic, and even cultural context. Because you find in this context, both globally and nationally, there are social norms in many parts of the world and indeed in our nations, diverse nations, that result in multiple and various forms of discrimination against youth and young women in particular. And so you find that in present day Nigeria, political participation and representation is largely unattainable and inaccessible to Nigerian youths. In spite of the Not Too Young to Run law of 2018, Nigeria's political space is still overtly dominated by the old generation and godfathers. They determine who gets what, when, and how. They favor their bodies, their cronies, to the detriment of many young Nigerians that are willing to participate in politics. And when we say the youths are leaders of tomorrow, you find that this contradicts the leadership monopoly practiced by aging Nigerian rulers. And so leadership is portrayed as the right of the elderly in Nigeria, irrespective of societal changes since independence. Youth, according to Yiga Africa, in Nigeria had the numerical superiority in the 2019 general elections, with 51.11 of the roughly 43 registered voters in the country. But the actual elections itself was a different matter entirely, with only about 46.3% of the total registered youth voters, a figure which added to, well, significantly 19 million. Now, this number, 19 million, was more than half the total voter turnout which stood at roughly 28.6 million, with the actual youth voting bloc at about 66%. Now, what I'm saying is that in the 2019 general elections, the youth bloc in Nigeria contributed the largest voters. And so, juxtapose this against the picture of the lack of youth representation in leadership roles. Youth representation cuts across about 1%. And with 1% of the leadership positions across all levels and tiers of governance in Nigeria, a worrisome picture is painted for an emerging economy like ours. 1% representation of the most active members of the voting bloc and the majority citizen population makes it unacceptable. And historically, if you look, you find that Nigeria make room for youth Nigeria has always made room for youth representation in governance. Talk about the Ziks of this world, the Awolowos, and so on and so forth. Even President Buhari was a youth when he took over office, when he became the head of state over 30 years ago. But recent decades see a significant shift from that reality. Now, talking about women in politics, what are the major issues? Now, starting from the global and moving on to the local, you find that women's participation in politics, its governance has been lacking behind. And there's been although there has been a steady improvement over the past years. Now, as at last year, September, there were only 26 women serving as heads of states of government in 24 countries, okay? And literature tells us that gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be reached for another 130 years. You have 10 countries with a woman head of state and 13 countries with a woman head of government. 21% of government ministers were women, and only 14 countries have achieved 40% or more women in cabinets. And now with an annual increase of just 0.5 percentage points, we're saying that gender parity in ministerial positions, for instance, will not be achieved before 2027. Only 4 countries have 40% or more of women in parliament in single or lower houses. And this includes Rwanda, that has been the success story, Cuba, Bolivia, and the United Arab Emirates. And globally, there are 27 states in which women account for less than 10% of parliamentarians, and this includes Nigeria. And so at the current rate of progress, gender parity in national legislative bodies will not be achieved before 2063. In terms of women in politics, since our venture into democracy in 1999, the Fourth Republic, when Nigeria returned to civil rule, the country has conducted 6 general elections, of which the record of women political representation has been somehow minimal, marginal, and indeed poor. 7% of women representation was in the lower house was recorded in 2007. In 2003, we had, and 2019 and 2003, we had 3.7% and 4.9%. So the 7% in 2007 was applauded. However, the figures declined to 68.8% and 59.6% in 2011 and 2015. And as at now, we have 6% in the National Assembly in Nigeria, about 6%. Only 7 senators, 22 House of Rep members, and this is far below the global average of 22%, the African average of 23.4%, and even the West African sub-region average of 15%. So what I'm saying is that there's been a lack of progress in terms of women's political representation in Nigeria. And of course, if we consider the role women play in our socio-economic and cultural landscape, this is not acceptable. And the expectation is that the increasing role of women in society should translate to greater inclusion of women in political processes. Now, this is not to be, and I'm taking my cue from the decisions of the National Assembly to reject the proposed 5 gender bills in March 2022. The gender bill sought to promote more opportunities for women in political parties, in governance, and the society at large. Also, before this, in December of 2021, the Nigerian Senate rejected for the second time the Gender Equality Opportunities Bill, which was designed to secure the rights of women and girls in the country. And so Nigeria is far from being a gender equal society. There are various obstacles to the political participation of women and youth in Nigeria. And these obstacles span from formal institutionalized political processes where women feel rapidly disempowered and annihilated, to socio-cultural obstacles, to psychological, motivational barriers, okay? And you find that the obstacles to youth political participation therefore occur at different levels and in different areas. Like I said earlier, they are structural, they are individual, they are also organizational, they are cultural as well. And in terms of the youth participation in politics, a few of the hindrances at the structural level includes money politics, the increased cost for politicking in Nigeria, embarrassingly out of reach of the average Nigerian, not to talk of the youth, social and cultural traditions, which indeed it portends that that politics has been a domain of older and often male and wealthy citizens, and the youth are alienated. And indeed, young women in this realm are often subjected to what I call double discrimination. First, discriminated on account of their age, and also on account of their gender. At the individual level, there are some obstacles also that hinder youth and youth political participation. Distrust in the political institutions itself, understandably so, lack of access to knowledge about political processes, which is telling on the country itself and the process itself, okay? Poor quality voter education and enlightenment particularly, social and economic exclusion and marginalization. Look, it's difficult to find a sustainable job. The daily struggle for many people in Nigeria, in all parts of the country, is real. They can hardly cope with precarious working conditions. And so venturing into politics in that realm is indeed, I would say, a mission impossible. Now, in terms of women, obstacles to women's political participation, they are more or less the same as what I have just enumerated. And so you find that throughout the electoral cycle, women, like the youth, contend with many barriers, structural, institutional, and individual. And some of them are the traditional gender roles and gender-based stereotypes, the male-dominated model of politics, lack of party support, exclusion from decision-making structures, the perception by women themselves, or some women, that politics is dirty, violence from within and from outside political parties, lack of political experience, even family voting and pressure from families sometimes and communities on the exercise of women's political rights. So these are some of the obstacles. But having identified them, what are the way forward? I believe that the development of Nigeria is truly in the hands of the young and the active. That means the youth and women as well. The country as we know it is riddled with insecurities, with poverty, economic degeneration, and political instability. Vote buying is the order of the day, electoral malpractices, and other corrupt activities adversely affect the integrity of most elections in the country. I'm not saying anything new. Also, Nigerians do not vote because they simply see no reason to do so. And the few that do are affected by the current situation of voting for the candidate who probably talks a lot, who bluffs a lot, or who spends the most. In fact, the spending part of it more than all the others. Now, this is a deplorable situation. And I believe that it is a wake-up call from oblivion for Nigerian youths and women, that they need to harness their population advantage, their demographic advantage, to demand for a change with an inclusion in the nation's political system. Democratization, as we all know, is not a linear process. It's continuous. It requires support. It requires development. And so to respond to the needs of the youth and women and to guarantee their basic human rights are recognized and should be enforced. Their active and meaningful participation in society, in democratic practices and processes is therefore important. And what I'm saying is that meaningful participation and leadership require that young people and women have opportunities, capacities, and they must benefit from an enabling environment and relevant evidence-based programs and policies at all levels, okay? And if Nigerian women are to make a case and the youth in 2023, for instance, they should look beyond getting just getting their PVCs and simply voting, but to vote intentionally, that is to vote right. The youth and the female population in Nigeria must present themselves as a force to be reckoned with in the 2023 elections by doing what? Being politically active, raising and supporting candidates with people-driven policies, and with uncompromised prospects for good governance. Who they are is the question. Being resilient, they should also be resilient in demanding a change of government with their votes and actively participate in the 2023 election poll. Now, like I've said earlier, we have a bulk of the voting number resting on the hands of youth and women. And so the focus to me should shift away from voting for the candidates who has all the money to spend on finding candidates with people with focused policies and who have plans for inclusion. Beyond voting, I'm saying that there's need to enforce public accountability, something sorely lacking in today's politics. And when you have the bulk of the voting power, you're meant to recognize your role as the arbiter of impunity from elected officers. And so the youth must begin to show more interest in politics. Their work is actually crucial to addressing the democratic experience of Nigeria. Their ideas and approaches may differ from expected practices, but they are usually dedicated to supporting democracy. And so approaches to democratic improvement in Nigeria should draw on the undervalued potential which is embedded within the young people's democratic spirit. With 19 million voters in 2019, like I said earlier, Nigerian youths have the majority say in who wins or who loses elections in Nigeria. Buhari won the 2019 elections with about 19 million votes. Consider this against the 19 million Nigerian youths that actually voted in that elections. Now, moving forward for women, the extent to which women can register to vote, stand as candidates, cast the votes, and take part in the highest level of decision-making all represent an indicator of an inclusive democracy, as with the youth. The more women who participate as voters, as candidates, as political party leaders, electoral administration staff, and so on and so forth, the more accepted their place in politics becomes. And so I'm saying that there is great prospect for improved governance, and that Nigerian youth and women must wake up to take charge of their political destiny. They must permeate the nooks and crannies of politics and decision-making and participate actively in politics. We must support political parties that have different ideologies, okay, to those of the past, support credible candidates, and such create an enabling environment for political and economic growth. It finds that stakeholders have critical roles to play in enhancing youth's and women's political representation in society, all stakeholders. First, also, apart from the individuals themselves. So political parties should adopt and implement party-specific youth gender quotas, informal targets, and other positive action mechanisms at all levels of office, including for internal party positions. For civil society groups, they should conduct information and awareness raising campaigns to encourage youth and women to stand for election. They are actually doing this. And in running capacity building programs to support them in this process. Now, these actors can contribute to developing the skills, experience, knowledge, and resources of youths and women in the pipeline for elected office and once they enter. And now finally, there are lots of opportunities for youths and women inclusion in Nigerian politics, and that's what I'm saying. I'm also saying that the resurgence is around the corner. It is in our hands. The youth and women must leverage on the political and economic powers which they wield, even the social powers as well. The NSAS 2020 protest organized and managed by Nigerian youth against police brutality is a major pointer to the power of a focused, passionate, and charged youth bloc and what they can do to engender change in the political realm. Also, the March 2022 protest by hundreds of Nigerian women across the nation against the rejection of the 5 gender bills that guaranteed increased gender equality is also a pointer of what an active collection of youth and women can achieve. And so today I see thousands of young heroes and heroines, Fumilayo Ransom Kutis, Margaret Echoes, Gambo Sawabas, Dora Quinleys, Antonio Nahoros, Michael Imodus, I hope you guys know these names, Aminu Kanos, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Obafemi Awolowo was marching forward in the political realm, on the political highway, and emerging in the call for a new Nigeria. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ma, for that session. We are so grateful, Ma. And thank you for charging us with the youth and women on this platform to take the condition and our destiny into our hands and go there and participate in Nigerian contemporary politics so that we can have that inclusive governance and democracy that we hope to see in the future. We'll quickly have a question and answer session. Because of time, we'll take only be entertaining just 3 questions. So if you have any questions to ask our speaker, you can just unmute yourself and speak.
Any questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, Ma, for that wonderful session. And it was really an eye-opening one. And you got my attention with the position that youth are the major voters in Nigeria. I'm just hearing of that. Though I was expecting, my prediction is that maybe most of the youth are in the north. I don't understand. Because we had youth presidential aspirants there that are supposed to emerge as winners during the election. But God knows it all. My question is there a way to unify our voting bloc, that is the youth, so that maybe our preferred candidates can win elections. Do you have suggestion for us? Maybe things we can do to unify the youth, to have a common ground, to have common say, because only when the youth are united, that's the only time they can effect a change. So we like your motherly advice, ma'am. And also, I observed that on the social media and even other platforms, the youth are getting really frustrated. I can't use the word give up. Let me say they're about to give up. Some are already hopeless. They believe the country can't get better. They believe we can't get leadership rights in Nigeria. Some don't even know the roles they are expected to play. And there is something called propaganda. Our youth, they don't use I don't know how to put it. They are not thinking again. When we see anything on social media, we just want to believe. I don't know the advice you can give us as a mother for the youth, so as to reinforce our belief in Nigeria, reinforce our belief in the electoral process. So this is my question, ma'am.
Okay. 2 questions. Can we just take all the questions if there are any more? Okay. So that's the first one, how to unify the youth within a voting bloc, and how to make the best of the social media, as it were. Yes? And we have any more?
Yeah, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Exactly.
Salah very much. Shala is my name. Thanks for the wonderful lecture you have given to us. Quickly, my perspective through which I want to ask the question is pertaining to the youth, the male in particular. My emphasis on the issue of youth involvement in government. I want to use Oyo State, where I belong presently, as a yardstick. That what we are experiencing from the fewer youths that are involved in the ongoing government is even a little bit not on comparative level with those tabas, quote and unquote. That we are being disappointed with the way youth that are involved are also at least devising the mechanism aim at promoting good governance. So my emphasis is, even if we come to gaining that particular yearning that youth participation is important in our political activities, how sure are we that these youth that are already being starved with abject poverty can still take the country to the promised land? That is number one. Then 2, for my findings, I come to know that the expression of where you see belong to the where you sit will determine your contribution or your action and inaction. I believe that those youth that are involved in politics now, they are not being objective in terms of promoting or propagating good governance. By the time you look at their profile, you will see that because they belong to one party, they are gaining financial means from one party. That is the essence of supporting the candidate there. So, and this is overall a product of a poverty online. What do you think, from your wealth of experience, can be the solution to this? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Then I give my answer.
Good afternoon, man. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I would like to ask a question from the perspective of youths in the diaspora, because one of the things I've observed personally is that youths, a category of youths, when they were in Nigeria, they seem to be very enthusiastic about issues of governance, issues of democracy in the country. And then once they get the opportunity to leave the country and experience how democracy actually functions in the globalized world, this feeling of hopelessness, this feeling of wanting to save myself first and then wanting to rush to get probably permanent citizenship or and whatnot, just to escape the Nigerian narrative, that kind of feeling comes up. And I, for instance, living here in Germany, and I try to follow a lot of news from Nigeria, and it's sometimes gets scary to discover that most of the news coming from the country are usually news about one attack somewhere, this, that. I mean, mostly terrible news. So my question then has to go with the fact that how do we address this issue of Nigeria continuing to lose its youth to developed countries? We continue. These developed countries have a lot of scholarship, a lot of wonderful opportunities through which they woo the active youth who would have otherwise been able to positively contribute to the development of their country. And when these youths themselves, by the time they are exposed to better lives in these countries, it becomes almost easy to just give up on their country. So how do we address these issues? How do we improve on the interest of youth in wanting to positively impact on the trajectory of governance and development in the country? Thank you.
Okay, so let me give my answers to these three questions, which all focus on the youth. And no questions on the women. I guess maybe, are there no young women on this platform? No women on the platform. Anyway, first is to say, yes, the youth are the majority voters in Nigeria, going by data from INEC. And so that shows the power that the youth has if properly channeled. Now, the others, remember I said that when we talk about the youth, they are not homogeneous. So what quality, caliber, type of youth are we talking about? Who are those ones that are truly and genuinely involved in engendering the change that will turn the country around, such that, as the last speaker said, we will not have this migration of the youth out of the country to the detriment of the nation itself? And I think one of a few, I would mention two avenues to achieve, okay, a unifying vote is through enlightenment. We need to have greater voter and civic education, targeting the youth on one hand. We need to have trainings, capacity buildings, programs for youth who are interested not only in running for office, but in the political process itself. And that's why in my presentation, I mentioned the various stakeholders. So all the stakeholders, including government itself, has different roles to play. How do we, like we say in the gender world, create a movement that will involve the articulate youth demographic, not the youth population that we are told have been voting in the North, okay, but those who are aware and need a change. So first is through the civil society, through government, through the various stakeholders, INEC, targeting programs at encouraging the youth to see the way forward. And this entails a lot of spending of money first. And then the other is the youth themselves. They need to be aware, to read more, to learn more, to engage more, okay? The last speaker talked about citizens' participation. That's what we're saying. We should not be aloof. We should not think it is us against them or it is for them. So both the various stakeholders and the youth themselves need to engage in different ways to ensure that we have a unified. Can we unify to vote? Because at the end of it, voting becomes largely subjective. That's another question, and not the issue for now. So I'm questioning, as it were, that narrative of a unified bloc, but drawing attention to the power in which is embedded within the possibility of that unified bloc when it comes to voting. Now, the social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly is embedded in the social media. And what we take of it from it and what we make of it largely depends on us as well. So it's a very fertile ground for information gathering, for even activism. At least we have been told now that Peter Obi is largely embedded in the social media, in his politicking. And many others, Showere, all of them. Somebody mentioned some youth, Duro Toye, the last elections, quite a number of them. So yes, the social media is there, but it is now left to us to make the best use of it. Nobody can tell us what to do, except we engage it positively. So it's positive engagement with the social media. And then the youth involvement in government also largely and sadly depends on government itself. To what extent do they want to accommodate, allow, empower the youth to be part of the political system? And then without role models, how else do you encourage the others? Until we can point out, and indeed we can. There are quite a number, maybe not in your state, but I do know that there are some youthful Nigerians in government, in the Oyo State cabinet, maybe not as young as we would expect, that we can talk about. And offhand, I can't remember, but I remember having a conversation, I think sometimes with Professor Ayede, and he mentioned somebody within the Oyo State cabinet, okay, who is relatively younger than this aged politician. So that's it. A lot depends on government expanding the political space and allowing the youth to come in. And then the youth in diaspora. Even for me, I have 3 children. 2 out of them are out of Nigeria, and they're doing well. We will continue to lose our youth to the Western world, even non-Western world, where they think the grass is greener. Why? Because the Nigerian environment is hostile to youth, to women, hostile to everybody. And that is why we need to engender good governance, a governance that is all inclusive and all accommodating, that would not allow ASU to go on strike for 6 months and still be napping. That would not allow the dollar to depreciate to 710 naira as at today, if it is true. That would not allow electricity to be a challenge in 2022, and so on and so forth. So dangerous migrations of the youth out of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have learned, and I guess for each and every one of us, we need to take that mandate and reach out to people in our local communities, in our network of friends, and ensure that we go out and talk to people to ensure that we have that income enlightening people. It's very, very key for us to do that. So I'm going to appreciate every one of us for taking out their time to join the meeting. We are so grateful, and we'll be closing up around the now. Just to round up, I'll end up and close the meeting for us. Over to you, Larry.
Okay, I want to express, on behalf of ApexGuide Development Center, I want to express our profound gratitude to our speakers today who have taken their time to be here with us. We've had 2 amazing sessions, and I believe that we have all been impacted in one way or the other. The conference continues tomorrow by 11 a.m. Nigerian time, and we encourage everyone to please be part of us. And you can also share the Zoom link with friends and families who would definitely also benefit from the program. So once again, thank you. We are happy to have you, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm glad to have been here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and all the best tomorrow.